Hello and welcome dear students. In this video, I have provided solutions to MUHS Winter 2021 Paper 1 Brief Answer Question. So let's begin. First question is, name marker enzyme for number 1 cytoplasm and number 2 Golgi complex. So what are marker enzymes? Marker enzymes are preferentially located within a given organelle and it is used to identify the purity of organelle preparation. That is, after ultracentrifugation, a given organelle can be identified by assessing the activity of this marker enzyme. So let's see the marker enzyme for cytoplasm and Golgi complex. So marker enzyme for cytoplasm is lactate dehydrogenase and for Golgi complex it is galactosyl transferase. Okay. Now in this question only two organelles are asked, but you should know the marker enzyme for other organelles as well. So the marker enzyme for mitochondria is ATP synthase. Marker enzyme for lysosome is cathepsin, and for microsomes it is glucose 6 phosphatase. Okay, it is also asked in MCQ. Okay, so these are the marker enzyme for different organelles. Let's move to the next question. Structural difference between starch and glycogen. So it is a heading, not in question form. So structural difference between starch and glycogen. So what is the structural difference between starch and glycogen? So I have made a table depicting the differences between starch and glycogen with related to their structure. Okay, so first parameter is repeating unit. Okay, so in starch, now you know the starch is composed of amylose and amylopectin. So amylose, in amylose, the glucose unit, they are present bound by alpha 1,4 glycosidic bond. So it is a linear bonding. Okay, there is no branching. In amylopectin, there is a branching with the help of alpha 1,6 glycosidic bond, and this branching is present at every 24 to 30 residue. Okay, branching is present at every 24 to 30 residue. Okay, so this is about starch. Now what is the difference with respect to glycogen? Here there is a branching, but branching is more extensive. That is, the branches are present in every 8 to 12 residues. Okay, branching are there, branching is there every 8 to 12 residue, every 8 to 12 glucose residue. So there is a more extensive branching in glycogen as compared to amylopectin in starch. Okay, it is present in amylopectin at every 24 to 30 glucose residue, here only 8 to 12 glucose residue. So that is actually a difference, basic difference between starch and glycogen is this. Okay. Next parameter or next point is number of monosaccharide units. Okay, in amylose, number of monosaccharide unit is 50 to 5,000, and in amylose up to 10 to the power 6, that is up to 1 million. Okay, in glycogen, number of monosaccharide unit, they are up to 50,000. Okay, this is the second structural difference. And with respect to branching, we have already seen amylose, it is a linear structure, so there is no branching. Amylopectin, the branching is less extensive, and in glycogen, the branching is more extensive. Okay, branching is more extensive in glycogen. So this is the structural difference between starch and glycogen. It is a BAQ of 2 mark. So answer this BAQ up to the point. They have asked about the structural difference, not other difference. So we focus on structural. We focus on structural difference. Okay. Let's see the subsequent question. Explain why NADH transferred through glycerol phosphate shuttle generates 1.5 ATPs. Okay, you have to explain why NADH transferred through glycerol phosphate shuttle generates 1.5 ATP. Now, when NADH is produced in cytosol, it is impermeable to inner mitochondrial membrane. So, it is not able to cross that membrane and enter into ETC where ATP synthesis is taking place. So, there are two shuttle pathways for transfer of NADH. One is glycerol phosphate shuttle and another is malate aspartate shuttle. But let's focus here only on glycerol phosphate shuttle. Okay, so why NADH transfer through glycerol phosphate shuttle generate 1.5 ATPs. So what is happening in glycerol phosphate shuttle? There is a one intermediate of glycolysis, that is dihydroxyacetone phosphate, which is present in cytosol. So this dihydroxyacetone phosphate accept two reducing equivalents or two electrons from NADH and transfer it to glycerol 3 phosphate. So that is the first step in glycerol phosphate shuttle. Reducing equivalents are transferred from NADH to glycerol 3 phosphate. This is happening in the cytosol. Okay, now it is catalyzed by glycerol 3 phosphate dehydrogenase, which is present in cytosol. Now, this enzyme, glycerol 3 phosphate dehydrogenase, it has two isoenzymes. One is present in cytosol and another is present in mitochondria. So, this reaction is catalyzed by cytosolic glycerol 3 phosphate dehydrogenase. Okay, now what happens next? Now, reducing equivalent are present in glycerol 3 phosphate. Glycerol 3 phosphate is able to enter the mitochondria from the cytoplasm. Okay, now reducing equivalent from glycerol 3 phosphate are then transferred to FAD. Okay, to form FADH with the help of mitochondrial glycerol 3 phosphate dehydrogenase. Notice the difference. This is cytosolic form and this is mitochondrial form of glycerol 3 phosphate dehydrogenase. Okay, now this reducing equivalent are transferred from glycerol 3 phosphate to FAD, and from FAD there is a formation of FADH2. Okay, so FADH2 now have this reducing equivalent, and the FADH2 will now be channeled through the electron transport chain, not through NADH. Okay, in malate aspartate shuttle, NADH itself get regenerated inside the mitochondria, but here there is no regeneration of NADH. Instead, the reducing equivalent are transferred to FAD to form FADH2. And what happens to FADH2? It will transfer the reducing equivalent to ubiquinone or coenzyme Q, then complex 3, and further electron transport is taking place, reducing the oxygen to water. Okay, so FAD to FADH2 and then electron transport chain, through electron transport chain. Okay, then we will focus how these 1.5 ATPs are generated through FAD. Okay, because this is very specific question and we will be very specific in answering so that you get 100% mark in this question. Okay, so now we will focus on how these 1.5 ATPs are generated. So for FADH2, total proton pump out of inner mitochondrial membrane is 6. Okay, because how 6? 4 are pumped out from complex 3 and 2 are pumped out from complex 4. So total 6. And for synthesis of 1 ATP, total proton pump in the matrix is 4. Okay, total proton pump in the matrix for synthesis of 1 ATP is 4. Now, so what is the number of ATP produced from 1 FADH2? That will be 6 by 4, that is 1.5 ATP. Okay, so this is very specific answer because it is specifically asking about glycerol phosphate shuttle. Don't describe there the malate aspartate shuttle and what are the differences between the two shuttle pathways. This question is very specific. Why NADH transferred to glycerol phosphate shuttle generating 1.5 ATP. So firstly, we have described in the first part, we have described what is the how the reducing equivalent are transferred to FAD, and from FAD to your electron transport chain, FAD to FADH2 ubiquinone complex 3 complex 4 and generation of ATP through proton pumping. And then we have focus on how this 1.5 ATP are generated through FADH2. Okay, so 6 by 4 is equal to 1.5 ATP. Okay, let's move to the succeeding question. Name any two peroxisomal biogenesis disorder. Name any two peroxisomal biogenesis disorder. Now, what are peroxisomal biogenesis disorder? There are group of conditions. They are group of conditions in which the peroxisome organelle biogenesis is affected. Okay, there is complete loss or partial absence in the synthesis of this peroxisome. Biogenesis of peroxisome is either partially affected or completely affected. So, which are the two peroxisomal biogenesis disorder? There are three important peroxisomal biogenesis disorder. First is Zellweger syndrome, second is infantile Repsum disease, and third is neonatal adrenoleukodystrophy. Neonatal adrenoleukodystrophy. So these are the three peroxisomal biogenesis disorder. We have to remember the two, and these are important ones: Zellweger syndrome, infantile Repsum disease, and neonatal adrenoleukodystrophy. Okay, let's move to the succeeding question, that is question number 2E. Explain why copper deficiency leads to defective collagen formation. Okay, now I will mark this question with star because this is a very important question and it is repeated in summer 2023 supplementary exam. It is repeated in recent paper, that is summer 2023 supplementary exam. Okay, so that is the importance of just reading and looking at the solutions for this previous year MUHS question paper. Okay, so let's see. So why copper deficiency leads to defective collagen synthesis? It is based on the enzyme. Okay, it is due to the enzyme which contains copper and which has role in the collagen synthesis. Okay, which is this enzyme? The enzyme is lysyl oxidase. So lysyl oxidase is a copper containing enzyme which is required for the formation of covalent cross linkage in the collagen. Okay, it is required for covalent cross linkage. Now in the next step we will describe the reaction catalyzed by lysyl oxidase and how this covalent cross linkage are produced in the collagen so that collagen become a mature one. So what is the reaction catalyzed by lysyl oxidase? It converts lysine residue of collagen to lysine residue. Okay, lysine residue of collagen to lysine residue. It is oxidative deamination reaction. Okay, it is oxidative deamination reaction. So lysine residue of collagen is converted to lysine residue. In the next step, this lysine residue condense with the lysine residue of the neighboring collagen molecule, and once this condensation is taking place, there is a formation of cross link, and this is how collagen fiber get mature. You get mature collagen fiber. So that is the importance of this lysyl oxidase enzyme, that is formation of covalent cross linkage in collagen molecule. Okay, so obviously when there is a deficiency of this lysyl oxidase or deficiency of the copper will lead to the defective collagen synthesis. Okay, so again very specifically the answer is provided. You have to mention this reaction, what is the role of lysyl oxidase during the maturation of collagen fibers. Okay, let's move to the subsequent question. Name two zinc containing metalloenzymes. So now in nature there are more than 300 zinc containing metalloenzyme, but important one you should remember, that is carbonic anhydrase. Very common and it is very commonly asked in MCQ also. Carbonic anhydrase contains zinc. Okay, so you can remember any two enzyme. I have given you the common enzyme which are there in your curriculum. So carbonic anhydrase, alkaline phosphatase, RNA polymerase, DNA polymerase, alcohol dehydrogenase, carboxypeptidase, superoxide dismutase, and lactate dehydrogenase. So these are the metalloenzyme that contain zinc. Remember 2 or 4 enzymes. Carbonic anhydrase, there is always a frequently asked MCQ on this. Okay, let's move to the succeeding question. Define mutagens. Give 2 example. This is again, I will mark star on this because this is again repeated in summer 2023 supplementary, not exactly repeated, but in this exam they have asked about 4 examples of anti-mutagens. Okay, so that is again importance of reading the previously asked topics, subtopics. You have to read that one, because subsequent exam it can be repeated as it is, as we have seen previously with respect to copper deficiency, or there can be another question based on the same subtopic. Okay, so what is mutagen? What is the definition of mutagens? So any physical or chemical agent which is capable of producing mutation. Very easy definition, 1 mark for definition, 1 mark for writing 2 example. So for 1 mark, any physical or chemical agent which have capacity to produce mutation is called mutagens. What are the examples of mutagen? UV radiation, ionizing radiation, deaminating agent, example nitrous acid, alkylating agent, example ethylene oxide, intercalating agent, example acridine, hydroxylamine, and free radicals like superoxide anion and hydrogen peroxide. Okay, so these are the examples of mutagens: UV radiation, ionizing radiation, deaminating agent, alkylating agents, intercalating agent, and free radicals. Let's see the upcoming question. Explain why HMP shunt is important to prevent methemoglobinemia. Okay. Now, before answering this question, what is methemoglobinemia? What is the abnormality in methemoglobinemia? Ferrous form, which is ferrous form of iron, which is present in heme in normal condition of hemoglobin, it is get converted to ferric form. Ferrous form of heme iron gets converted to ferric form and form hemoglobin. Okay. And now we will see what is the role of HMP shunt. So what is methemoglobin? So heme iron in ferric state, okay, heme iron is present in the ferric state as compared to normal ferrous form of heme iron in hemoglobin. Now in generally there is a production of reactive oxygen species due to the cellular metabolism, ROS, reactive oxygen species like H2O2, they are generated, and they can lead to the conversion of heme iron from ferrous state to ferric state. Okay, so due to the generation of reactive oxygen species, there can be the conversion of heme, okay, in the hemoglobin, that is conversion of ferrous iron in the heme iron to ferric form, and there can be the formation of met hemoglobin. Okay, now to counteract the effect of ROS, to counteract the effect of reactive oxygen species, there is a requirement of glutathione, and it should be present in reduced form. Okay, to counteract the harmful effects of ROS, the glutathione should be present there, and that too in its reduced form. Now, to keep glutathione in reduced state, you require NADPH. Okay, and NADPH is produced from HMP shunt. Okay, and thus it prevents formation of methemoglobin or formation of methemoglobinemia. Okay, so that is how the HMP shunt is important to prevent methemoglobinemia. Okay, now what happens? Now you should draw this diagram that depicts the role of NADPH. So what happens? There is a production of reactive oxygen species, for example, hydrogen peroxide. Okay. Now with the help of glutathione peroxidase, it get converted to water molecule, and for this reaction, body require this glutathione, GSH represent glutathione in reduced state. Okay, in reduced state, should be present in reduced state. Okay, so during this reaction, the reduced form of glutathione is converted to oxidized form, and for regeneration of reduced glutathione, you require one enzyme, that is glutathione reductase, and for this action of glutathione reductase, there is a requirement of NADPH, and the source of NADPH is from HMP shunt. Okay, is from HMP shunt. Okay, so that is why HMP shunt is important to prevent methemoglobinemia. Okay, so you write this and you should draw this pathway. What is the role of glutathione peroxidase? It counteracts ROS effect, but it requires glutathione in reduced state. During this reaction, glutathione get converted to oxidized state, and for the regeneration of reduced glutathione, you need another enzyme, that is glutathione reductase, which requires NADPH. So NADPH is required to keep glutathione in reduced state. So and the source of NADPH is HMP shunt. Okay, so this is how HMP shunt is important to prevent methemoglobinemia. Okay, let's move to the upcoming question. Enumerate 4 food sources highly rich in protein. Okay, so there are important food sources which are rich in protein. These are egg, cow milk, meat, fish, and lentils. So these are arranged according to the biological value of proteins. Okay, these are arranged according to biological value. So food which is highly rich in protein according to biological value is egg, followed by cow milk, meat, fish, and lentils. Okay, let's move to the succeeding question. Name two antioxidant lipotropic factor. This is again a star question. Okay, why? In summer 2023 supplementary, what they have asked is explain how vitamin E is a lipotropic factor. So same topic is repeated in supplementary 2023 summer exam. Okay. So how vitamin E is a lipotropic factor? Lipotropic factor. I already made a video on this. It is available in my channel. Okay. So let's see the name of two antioxidant lipotropic factor. One is already there, that is vitamin E. Okay. One is vitamin E, selenium, and omega-3 fatty acid, for example, linolenic acid. Okay, so these are the antioxidant lipotropic factor. Okay, next question. Name two long chain fatty acid. Very easy question. For 2 marks, write two long name of two long chain fatty acid. What are long chain fatty acid? These fatty acid have 16 carbon or more than 16 carbon hydrocarbon chain. Okay, so what are the example? Palmitic acid, you can write saturated as well as unsaturated fatty acid. So it saturated are palmitic acids, stearic acid, arachidic acid, then oleic acid. These are unsaturated. Now oleic acid, linoleic acid, linolenic acid, and arachidonic acid. Okay, so very easy question for 2 mark. Just write two names to get 2 mark. Okay, so these all BAQs are very scoring question. So thank you.